So what is iron deficiency anemia, and is it possible to raise your iron levels and overcome iron deficiency anemia on a plant-based or a vegan diet? That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. I'm also going to be sharing the results from my personal blood work that I had done this year, and I'm going to talk about how I'm personally dealing with iron deficiency anemia and my strategy to overcome iron deficiency anemia on a plant-based diet and not taking any supplements. So make sure you tune in for this whole video because I'm going to be sharing some very specific strategies, including 10 plant-based foods that are high in iron or good sources of iron, as well as one bonus item or one bonus way to raise your iron levels that actually is not a food, but it's something that you probably have in your kitchen. So make sure you stick around to hear that. Plus, at the end, I'm going to share 7 ways that you can help improve the uptake of the iron that you consume through plant-based sources, so that you're getting the most out of the iron that you consume. So we're going to be covering on a lot today, so make sure you stick around until the very end of this video so that you don't miss out on any of this good information. But before we get into all of that, I'm Khalil Lee, and on this channel, my wife and I share plant-based recipes as well as education and nutrition tips to help people live long, healthy, and prosperous lives. In terms of my personal background, my background is in exercise physiology. I also, for the past 8 years, have been working as a research scientist for a food and beverage company, specifically studying the effects of nutrition and hydration for athletes and active individuals. And other than that, my wife and I are also both former college athletes, and we are just bona fide foodies, y'all. We love all things food, all things cooking food, wholesome foods, growing foods, and just helping to coach people in terms of how they can create the right systems and strategies to maximize their nutrition. So if you feel like this is something that would benefit you, maybe you are a parent trying to live as long as you can, to see your children, your grandchildren, or maybe you're a student or an athlete, or maybe you're someone who works a 9-to-5 job and you're just trying to build some healthier habits when it comes to your nutrition. If you feel like this is something that would help you, we encourage you to subscribe to this channel and go along in this journey with us. But let's go ahead and dive right into these blood results. So what you're seeing on the screen right now are my blood results from this year. I did them just about a few months ago. And I'll admit, you all, well, just to give you just to backtrack for a little bit, my wife and I have been striving to get blood work done every year. It's something that we kind of make part of our yearly routine, especially at the beginning of the year. It's just a great thing to do. It's a great habit to build. And we would actually love to know from you all, do you get blood work done? If so, how often do you get it done? Do you get it done annually? Do you get it done twice a year? However often you get it done, or do you not get it done? We would love to know in the comments below. But typically when we've gotten blood work done, or when I've gotten blood work done, it's usually been just a lipid profile, which looks at cholesterol levels, triglycerides. But over the past 2 to 3 years, I've been getting a more comprehensive blood panel. So looking at different metabolites as well as complete blood counts, as you can see on the screen here, to get that more holistic view of just kind of where my health is as a snapshot at that point in time. And it's definitely something that I would encourage, or we would encourage everyone out there to do if it's not something that you currently do. It's a great way to just get, again, an insider view of where you're at and maybe some areas that you can improve upon. But I will admit that when I got these results back, I was a little surprised, to be honest. Anytime you see red marks on a paper or on a report, that's usually not a good sign. Thinking back to our grade school days or college days, whenever you see the red pen on the paper right from the teacher, that's usually an indication that things aren't so great. But um, let's just go down some of these items and talk a little bit about exactly what they mean and how to interpret them. So CBC, that stands for complete blood count. So that's basically giving you an overview of, red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets, and kind of the health of your blood, so on and so forth. So I want to start here looking at the red blood cell count. So you can see that's in the normal range, was in the normal range. All right. But as we get a little bit lower, here we already start to see the red flag. So first thing is the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein in our red blood cells that carries oxygen throughout our bodies. And so hemoglobin is below the norm. I mean, plain and simple, as you can see right here. I mean, it's just no other way to put it. Next is the hematocrit. So the hematocrit is looking at the amount of your blood that's made up of red blood cells. So if you look at the different components of your blood, you have the plasma, which is the fluid part of the blood. You have your white blood cells and platelets. And then what's left over is the hematocrit, or the amount of red blood cells. So again, hematocrit also below where it should be. So don't have as many red blood cells, or at least I didn't have as many red blood cells as I should have had at this time. The next one I want to call out is MCV. This stands for mean corpuscular volume, which basically looks at the size of your red blood cells. So not only should we have enough red blood cells, but our red blood cells should be the right size. They should be, nice and plump, so to speak. And so again, also below average. So in other words, my red blood cells, not only do I not have enough, or did not have enough, but my red blood cells were a little puny. All right. So MCV was low. MCH, which stands for mean corpuscular hemoglobin, which looks at the amount of hemoglobin contained in the red blood cells, that was also near at the borderline. Even though I was in the right range, still near the borderline, but not the best situation here. And so I'm like, all right, what do we do using this information, or what should I do using this information? And so, instead of just kind of taking this for what it was, I wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive and see, how these numbers really stacked up in comparison to previous years. So what I decided to do was say, okay, is this a new thing? Have I always been at this place? Which is, again, another great thing that you can do when you get blood work done annually. So let's look at my blood results from the prior year, 2022. And the report looks a little bit different, not as nice and spread out as the other one was. But as you can see right here, and I've gone ahead and highlighted those key areas. And if you can see, it's a little bit harder to tell, but hemoglobin in 2022 was 13.4, so actually a little close to the lower end of the normative range. Hematocrit, again, I was within range, but on the lower side. MCV, again, right there at the borderline. MCH, again, near the borderline. So as I looked at this, it was really a wake-up call, because this really showed me that, I mean, even though in 2022 my numbers were within the average range, or within the ideal range, I was a little bit close to the borderline. I was on the lower end, which, you could say I was kind of maybe pre-IDA or pre-iron deficiency anemia, so to speak. But again, the numbers don't lie here, and it really was an indication that, all right, this is something that I really need to improve upon. And, as I thought about, have I noticed myself being anemic? I never really thought myself as being anemic, but, as you start thinking about your past and going through the years, and have realized, like, well, I mean, my hands often are cold. That's kind of always been a thing. I've had some other instances where maybe I felt a little bit tired, even, in my times as an athlete, times where I would, get a little fatigued or feel a little out of breath a little bit more than my other teammates. And so, it's one of those things where when you really evaluate your life and some of the things that you've experienced, could be an indication that maybe there's some things, some underlying reasons as to why you are feeling the way that you are feeling. So, again, definitely want to encourage everyone, if you haven't gotten blood work done, or if it's not something that you're not quite doing, again, it's a great way to kind of see what is going on in your body and ways to kind of help overcome any problem areas or areas that you can improve upon. But now what I want to do is let's dive a little bit deeper in terms of what iron deficiency and anemia actually is, and what are some of the causes of it, and how do we overcome it? What's the science behind it? So very simply, iron deficiency anemia is a condition, sorry, I'm jumping ahead here, a condition marked by a low red blood cell count, and it's caused by low iron in the body. And so in essence, what happens when you have iron deficiency anemia is, if you look at this figure here, on the left, you have a picture of what normal blood would look like. All right, so a good amount, a substantial amount of red blood cells. You have enough red blood cells, but whereas you look at the picture on the right, when you have iron deficiency anemia, again, there's that low count of red blood cells, and maybe your red blood cells look a little bit smaller. And so just to spell it out a little bit more, this is a diagram just to show what things should look like within our blood vessels, or what's contained inside of our blood vessels. So within your blood vessels, you have red blood cells, or we have red blood cells. But to give you a more in-depth view, if you look in the center here in this big circle, inside each red blood cell, we have this protein called hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin is a very important protein because it is the protein that carries oxygen throughout our bodies to all of our tissues and cells. And so you can kind of think of hemoglobin or red blood cells as kind of like a bus, right? Constantly onloading and offloading people. When you think about a bus in real life, maybe some of you all live in a big city, you ride the bus is constantly onloading and offloading people to their destinations. But with red blood cells, or with hemoglobin, it's constantly onloading and offloading oxygen throughout the bodies. As blood flows into the lungs, hemoglobin picks up oxygen, and then it carries it off to the rest of our bodies to dump it off in the muscles, every tissue, the brain, you name it, and then it goes back to the lungs and repeats that same cycle. And so basically what happens in the case of iron deficiency anemia is you have low iron, which leads to lower hemoglobin and lower levels of red blood cells. Iron is necessary because it is what helps our bodies to produce hemoglobin. So no iron or low iron, then you have no hemoglobin. And as a result, our body's ability to carry oxygen throughout the body is diminished, or it's negatively impacted. So you kind of have this whole cascade of events that we often see show up in a number of different ways. These are some of the symptoms that are common within iron deficiency anemia. We often think about the common ones like, fatigue, feeling a little tired or cold hands, maybe feeling a little out of breath, but maybe there are some others that maybe you haven't considered, such as dizziness or feelings of headaches, irregular heartbeats, or very rapid heartbeats. So you might be wondering, why would low iron or anemia cause an irregular or very rapid heartbeat? And it's due to the fact that, because our bodies have, basically a declined ability to carry oxygen throughout the body, our hearts, or your heart, has to work a little harder, pump a little bit faster, which causes this irregularly rapid heartbeat, or just arrhythmic heartbeat that you might sometimes feel. And actually, just again, to be transparent, I have experienced that, in the last couple of years, just some arrhythmia, some very rapid heartbeats, palpitations here and there. And, as some of you all may know, if you've experienced it before, it's a scary feeling. All right. It's not a great feeling. But why am I sharing all of this and why am I sharing these results? Well, for one, it's very important that I think we just be transparent because, maybe some of you all out there, as you see my wife walk by in the back, maybe some of you all out there are experiencing or dealing with symptoms of iron deficiency anemia. And, this is to show you all or to let you all know that, hey, you're not the only one. Secondly, it's important to show things like this and to talk about things like this, especially within the Black community, because, oftentimes we don't share or talk about our health in these in-depth ways. And one of the things I'm going to share in a moment here is that, this is something that really does impact our community a lot. It's very prevalent in our community. And so, really want to open up the hood and kind of talk about this. And also, to show that this is something that is not just, it's not just something that impacts women as we commonly think about, but this is something that can impact men and it can impact Black men such as myself. And I'm clearly an example of that. So, it's important, and we felt that it's important to just kind of go in depth about this and to talk about this on a deeper level. So iron deficiency anemia, just some stats here. It affects a little over 5% of the US population, that's estimated. And this is from data from a 2016 study that looked at data from the 2000s and the early 2010s. So who knows if that number or this number is the same now, but think about it, y'all, over 5% of the population. So that means that, 1 out of 20 people. So if you're in a room with 20 people, perhaps at least one person in that room is dealing with iron deficiency anemia. So just to put it into context. All right. So a little over 5% of the US population that's estimated, and it impacts an estimated approximately 30% of the world's population. That's almost 1 in 3 people. Just to go a little bit deeper with some of the stats here that are really eye-opening when it comes to anemia. This is a study or an article that was published in 2019 looking at just some of the prevalence of anemia in Black and white populations in the US. And so this is old data from the early 2000s. As you can see here, 2003 to 2007, data that was pulled from what's called the Reasons for Geographic and Racial Differences in Stroke Renal Ancillary Study. Basically, they looked at data that kind of singled out, the blood data from these people that were assessed, about 20,000 Blacks and whites that were recruited for the study. And here's the big kicker here. Anemia was 3.3 times more common in Blacks than whites. Think about that, y'all. 3-fold more common in Blacks than whites with different characteristics and correlates. And so what they concluded was that race differences in anemia prevalence were not explained by the factor study. Future research is needed into the causes and consequences. Speaking of which, one of the things that I learned when I was looking at all of this data is that iron epidemiology is still kind of an untapped area when it comes to research in terms of, what are some of the causes, what are some of the, ethnic trends and correlations, so on and so forth. So if any of you all out there are researchers, maybe some of you all are epidemiological researchers, hey, just know that iron and iron deficiency anemia is a white space. That is a key opportunity area if you're looking for something to research. But again, iron deficiency anemia, according to this study, again, 3 times more common in Blacks than in whites in the US. Something else, athletes, another group that is highly susceptible to iron deficiency anemia, especially those participating in sports that train in very high volumes, like those in endurance sports, runners, cyclists. You think of soccer athletes as well, but it affects, plenty other team sport athletes as well. Those who are doing a lot of training, individuals, when you train, when you're physically active, you use a lot of iron. And so it is not uncommon to see athletes, especially women's athletes, who are impacted by iron deficiency anemia. I was looking at some research that estimated that as many as, or as much as 35% of adult women's athletes suffer from iron deficiency anemia. And then get this, the number of teenage female athletes that are estimated to be impacted by iron deficiency anemia, 50%. It's 1 out of 2. Okay, so for those of you all, maybe parents out there, maybe you have daughters who are participating in, middle school, high school sports. This is definitely something to start thinking about and trying to address now, especially as they're in their younger years. And so what are some of the causes of iron deficiency anemia? The first is blood loss. All right, this could be blood loss due to injury or surgery, also menstruation, which again is why anemia is obviously more common in women than it is in men. So blood loss is one of the reasons why people suffer from anemia. And just to be clear, as we're talking about iron deficiency anemia, I want to set this apart from other types of anemia that are out there, such as, say, sickle cell anemia. So if you're thinking about some of those other forms of anemia like sickle cell anemia, I won't be addressing those in this video, only a type of anemia in relation to low levels of iron and low levels of hemoglobin and red blood cell count. Another cause of anemia, chronic disease, all right, cancers, GI conditions, so on and so forth. Stages of life, all right. Iron deficiency anemia is sometimes common in infants, also teenagers, all right. So for those of you all who or all of us, have gone through adolescence at some point, and if you wondered why maybe you felt tired all of the time, perhaps it was due to more than just you not getting enough sleep, which I know that was the case for me, but maybe you weren't getting enough iron in your diet. And so adolescence, pregnancy, pregnant women, the iron needs for pregnant women are the highest of any group, all right? So pregnancy is definitely a stage where anemia can be prevalent, and it can also sometimes happen with people as they age. Heavy physical training, as I talked about before, one of the things I want to mention is that, my wife is a former college gymnast, and, this is something that, she still deals with till this day in terms of anemia, and she does take iron supplements. And so, even though, again, we're both former college athletes, but still, for some people, for some individuals, even after your career, it could be something that you still deal with. Diet is another cause of iron deficiency anemia, particularly if you're someone who follows a vegetarian or vegan or plant-based diet, such as, myself or my wife, Adrian, and I, we follow primarily a plant-based diet. On that note, would love to know from you all out there, do you follow a plant-based diet? Do you follow a vegan diet? If so, we would love to know in the comments what kind of diet you follow. And, do you really, if you do follow a vegan or plant-based diet, what are some of your ways of making sure that you get iron in your diet? For us specifically, we don't follow a strictly vegan diet. Even though some of the meals that we do cook are vegan, are fully vegan, we follow what you would consider more of a pescatarian diet or more of a Mediterranean type of diet. So even though we don't really eat meat or poultry per se, we do still eat fish. And so, we also consume, make sure that our diets involve a lot of consumption of nuts, seeds, whole grains, fruits and vegetables, of course, in which all of those comprise what would be considered a pescatarian or Mediterranean diet. And so, but all that said, because we don't really consume red meat or poultry outside of once every blue moon, which, that's really, really, really super special occasion. Adrian will sometimes get it if she's just, if we're at a certain restaurant and, maybe they have a good steak on the menu. That really only happens like 2 or 3 times a year where she'll actually do that. So, but other than that, really no, real red meat or poultry consumption for us. All right, another cause is heredity, genetics. All right, so I mentioned before that iron deficiency anemia is very common in the black population. So for those of you all of African descent, Afro-Latino, this could be something to consider. There is a specific type of iron deficiency anemia called iron refractory iron deficiency anemia, which is an actual genetic condition that is passed on to a child from both parents. If both parents carry the gene for that, then they pass it along to their child. And what iron refractory iron deficiency anemia is, in essence, is it's not that a person doesn't get enough iron in the diet, it's that their bodies don't absorb the iron. And so, one of the things that I'm sure some people, as you looked at my blood results, you might question and say, well, we don't know if you actually have, or you don't know if you actually have iron deficiency anemia, because to be honest, I didn't get my actual iron levels checked as part of that blood panel. If you notice, I just got the CBC, the complete blood count. So, you might be thinking, well, maybe you just don't have an issue with, bioavailable iron in your blood. Maybe you're just not absorbing it very well. And yes, that is true. It's possible that that might be the case. But in terms of, what is shown in my blood results, the signs point to, it's kind of like the saying goes, where there's smoke, there's fire. And so based on what I saw in my blood results, those signs point to the strong possibility. I mean, I'm pretty much, 95 to 99% sure that what I have is iron deficiency anemia, not a case of the inability to absorb iron. Now, again, I do follow a primarily plant-based diet. So, I'm going to talk about some strategies to make sure that you do get enough iron in your diet when you're consuming a plant-based diet. And it's possible that, even with the iron that I am consuming, that I'm maybe not ensuring that I'm taking it in and that my body's able to absorb it as best as possible. So again, I'm going to cover over some tips to help make sure that you're able to absorb the iron that you consume from plant-based foods. And so we have heredity in genetics. Last but not least, which I put an asterisk on here, is psychological stress. Now, you might be wondering, well, what's the thing with how does stress impact the body's ability to, take in iron, or how can it be a cause for anemia? And the answer actually is it deals with the gut. And so there is, the science suggests that when we are under psychological stress or distress, that it can inhibit the body's ability to take in and consume iron. So, hey, again, we're talking about, a lot of different factors here that relate with physical as well as psychological sources. So I'm going to show you all real quick this one study that kind of speaks on this a little bit more. And this is a study published, just one study published in 2008, but it's looking at the effects of psychological stress on serum iron and erythropoiesis, which is the process of red blood cell formation. That's what that means. And so this was a study that was, caveat, this was done in rats, so this was not a human study. But what these scientists wanted to look at was, they wanted to see whether pure psychological stress can cause a decrease of serum iron and affect erythropoiesis. And so what they did was they administered psychological stress to 20 rats with a communication box system. Not quite sure how that worked out, but kind of feel bad for the rats in that situation. And so And what they found for rats analyzed on the 7th and 14th day in the psychological stress group, femoral bone marrow iron was significantly decreased. Next, serum iron was decreased by 28.6%. HB, which is hemoglobin, decreased by 10% and 12.8%. Red blood cell count was decreased by 5.1%. MCV decreased by 1.7%. You kind of see the pattern here. And so in essence, what they found, or what they concluded, was that, you know, the rats who were stressed, who received the stress during the study, you know, serum iron and bone marrow iron showed significant decrease compared with the control. So, you know, there was a group of rats that went through the stress tests and a group of rats that did not. They also found that erythropoiesis was significantly inhibited. However, psychological stress, in terms of its effects, needs to be further investigated. But again, this was a study done in rats, but just to kind of show how stress can play a role within this, as we're starting to see, you know, as we've seen over the years, stress plays a role within a lot of health conditions that we find, especially within a cardiovascular sense. And so stress. So now, if you think about this, you know, let's say, you know, if you are a woman, a Black woman who is also an athlete and maybe also stressed, right? You're talking about a triple whammy or quadruple whammy when it comes to being susceptible to iron deficiency anemia. So as we're talking about this, think about whether it's yourself, or maybe some of you all know someone who's dealing with anemia, or maybe susceptible to anemia. Maybe you all have children or relatives, whoever it may be. It's important that we are aware of these things, and that you're aware of these things, because iron deficiency anemia is one of the most prevalent health conditions in the world. That's what the research shows. Again, I showed it earlier, 30% estimated of the world's population deals with this. And so it is very, very prevalent, and is oftentimes, it is an acquired condition. So oftentimes it's not something we're born with, although we can be born with it, like I showed earlier, or that we talked about earlier. But, you know, it is something that is usually acquired, which means that it is something that can be overcome with the right dietary strategy. And so if you're experiencing any of these symptoms, again, you know, irregular heartbeats, headaches, fatigue, cold hands, you know, if you get tired a lot throughout the day, if you get tired very easily when you're working out, all right, could be signs that maybe check your iron levels. Okay, all right, maybe get a complete blood count test. This is something that, you know, you don't even have to have a physician, a personal physician, to get blood work done. You can actually get blood work done. There's actually blood kits that are out there that you can use and test on yourself at home, and you can ship it off to a lab and they can assess it for you. What I'll do is I'll put some links in the description below to some at-home blood test kits that you can use, you know, at any point throughout the year. But very, very important, again, that, you know, if you're out there, if can't stress it enough, you know, we highly, highly encourage get blood work done annually. It is something that can only help you in the long run. And so this begs the question now, is it possible to raise your iron levels eating a plant-based or a vegan diet? Which is a great question. Is it possible? All right. Asked earlier, but definitely want to ask again. How many of you all out there follow a plant-based diet? All right. And is it possible to raise your iron levels using a plant-based diet? Well, as it is with anything, it takes the right systems. The answer is yes, it is possible, but it always takes the right systems and strategies. And just to quote our friend, he's not really our friend, but someone whom Adrian and I have been following for years, James Clear. Some of you all, or many of you all, are familiar with this quote from his famous book, Atomic Habits. He says, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So is it possible to raise your iron levels on a plant-based diet? Maybe you were told that it's not possible, or you have to eat meat, or you have to take, whatever, you have to take supplements. It is possible, okay? But as with anything, as with any health plan, nutrition plan, it takes discipline, and it takes also the right strategy and systems in place in order to ensure that you're building sound habits to get to where you're trying to get to. And so that's what we're going to be covering off on in terms of some specific foods that you can eat to make sure that you're hitting that mark. So we're going to jump into that in just a moment. But just to quickly go over a personal challenge for myself and something that I'm planning to do. So what I want to do is I want to see if I can raise my iron levels following primarily a plant-based diet, okay? And then B, I'm going to see if I can do this without taking any supplements, all right? There's the kicker. I'm also going to see if I can do it without consuming meat or poultry. Now, for the record, again, we do eat fish. Obviously, we, are pescatarian, eat a Mediterranean diet. However, we do not consume, or I don't consume, the types of fish often enough that are known for their iron amounts. So fish like sardines, I don't consume sardines at all. Anchovies, those are the types of fish that are known for their iron levels. Tuna is another fish that's known for its iron levels. I consume tuna on occasion, maybe, once every month, once every other month, whenever Adrian and I get sushi, but hey, not nearly enough to really, really get the benefits of the iron from those types or that type of fish specifically. So that is my personal challenge. I'm going to see if I can do this over the course of the next several months. And then by the end, or in another, I think about 5 or 6 months from now, towards the end of the year, I'm going to get another blood test done. I'm going to check my blood results again and then see where I fall, see if my numbers improve, see if my red blood cell count, my hematocrit, my MCV numbers, my hemoglobin levels, see if all of those improve. So, I'm always someone who's up for personal health challenges. It's something that, I just personally like to do. It's kind of the scientist in me. So I'm not saying that any of you all should, try this or do exactly what I'm doing at home. But, again, I'm wanting to be transparent about an experience and something that I'm going to test out because, hey, if I can be an example of, someone that's able to show that, hey, you can raise your iron levels without the use of supplements, without the use of, consuming meat or poultry, then that could be good information for those of you all out there in a similar situation to know that, hey, something like that is possible. All right. So now let's talk about, again, we talked about strategy. So let's look at a specific iron strategy for plant-based eaters. So before we get into some specific foods, it's important that we know first and foremost that what the iron requirements are for individuals. And so this is the NIH's recommended amounts, or this is, based on the norms that we have for the US in terms of iron intake. These are the iron RDAs, or recommended dietary allowances, for each of these different groups. You can find whichever group that you're in and kind of go from there. So we see for adolescents, the intake, or the recommended intake for adolescent boys is 11 milligrams per day. For girls, it's 15 milligrams per day. If we look at adults, 19 to 15 years of age, for men, it's 8 milligrams per day. And for women, it's 18 milligrams per day, because this is considered the childbearing age range for women. And then, as I mentioned before, for pregnant women, it gets as high as 27 milligrams per day. However, here's the kicker, all right? These are the recommended dietary intakes for, assuming that people are consuming meat-based products or animal-based products within their diet. However, I want to point this out, that according to the NIH, the RDAs for vegetarians are, get this, 1.8 times higher than for people who eat meat. And I thought this was really interesting to find. The reason for this is because heme iron, so there are two types of iron, just to kind of, give background. So there's what you call heme iron, which is iron that comes from an animal source, say meat or poultry. And then any iron that comes from a plant-based source is what's called non-heme iron, just to give you that little bit of background. And so heme iron from meat is more bioavailable than non-heme iron from plant-based foods. And meat, poultry, and seafood increase the absorption of non-heme iron. So basically what this is saying is that, because the absorption, our bodies don't absorb iron from plants as well as it does from animal sources. All right, so that's one thing to really keep in mind for those of you all vegetarians, vegans out there, those eating primarily a plant-based diet. Our bodies don't absorb non-heme iron or plant-based iron as well as it does animal-based iron. So we either have to have more iron in our diet, or we have to find ways to help make sure that our bodies absorb it well enough. And so that number of 1.8 times higher, I think they get that from the fact that heme iron is absorbed, I think about twice or double the rate that non-heme iron is consumed at. So I think that's the reason for that 1.8 times. So if I did a little bit of math here and giving you all a new set of guidelines for those of you all on a plant-based diet. So if we take that number 1.8 and multiply it times each of the numbers that we see here, and I did this only just for the adolescents, adults, and for pregnant women. I didn't do this for children and infants, but you can see how the numbers change now to be much higher for teenage boys. Again, that number goes up to 20 milligrams per day. For teenage girls, 27 milligrams per day. For adult men, that's almost 15 milligrams per day. For women between 19 and 50, that goes up to 32.5 milligrams of iron per day. Pregnant women, 49 milligrams of iron per day. The numbers really do get a lot higher, as you can see here. So, again, as you're thinking about strategy, as you're thinking about discipline, really have to be strategic and very conscientious about the iron that you're getting from plant-based foods. Something that I'm also going to share towards the end is I'm going to share an actual what a meal plan for a day would look like in order to consume 27 milligrams of plant-based iron in a day. So make sure you stick around to the end, because I'm going to share what actual meals and snacks would look like. I'm going to give you specific examples of those so that you can see what 27 milligrams of plant-based iron would look like. But y'all, this, in other words, I got my work cut out for me. All right. All of you have your work cut out for you. And so these are just some numbers to keep in mind as you're creating or thinking about the foods that you're eating. And so from that, let's get into the meat, quote unquote, of this talk and look at 10 solid plant-based sources of iron and some specific examples. So first and foremost, we have our green leafy vegetables, spinach, also those from the cruciferous vegetable family like Brussels sprouts. Broccoli would be included in this, Swiss chard. Lettuce like romaine or iceberg lettuce would not be included in this category. This is looking specifically at more of your darker green leafy vegetables. All right, and so kale doesn't really make this list. Kale, although kale does have some levels of iron, the amount of iron in kale is actually pretty low. But spinach, about 1 cup of cooked spinach is going to give you a little over 3 milligrams of iron. About a cup of raw spinach is going to give you about 1 milligram of iron, just to put it into the numbers and perspective. So, but yes, green leafy vegetables, definitely a good source of plant-based iron. real quick, if you all are getting value out of this content before we jump into the second one, we'd appreciate if you like this, let us know in the comments, maybe share this with someone whom you feel that this will benefit. We really love to hear from you all if this content is really helpful for you. All right, back into our list. So green leafy vegetables, the first one. The second, legumes. All right, this would include your beans, your peas, your lentils, all great sources of plant-based iron. Just to give you some specific examples, looking at some actual nutrition labels from foods that maybe some of y'all have in your pantries right now. And all of these foods that we're going to share, that I'm going to share, are foods. We're not sponsored by any of these brands, for the record. These are just foods that we use in our household, that we kind of keep as staples on rotation in our house. And again, could be foods that maybe you currently pick up from the grocery store, or maybe you want to consider picking up from the grocery store or from Amazon. But let's take a can of some of your typical black beans, frijoles negros for our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters out there. So if you look at a half of a cup serving of black beans from this brand, it's going to give you, if you see here, about 1.6 milligrams of iron. All right, so again, not too shabby there. That's just in a half of a cup, which is a reasonable amount. I mean, some of y'all out there, like myself, I love black beans. So for me, when I put black beans or have a dish with rice and black beans, my amount tends to get more towards like the 3/4 of a cup, because hey, it's just something that, love black beans. So 1.6 milligrams is what that'll give you. Let's look at, all right, some red lentils. Any red lentil lovers out there, let us know in the comments. We love us some red lentils. We actually have a recipe for an easy red curry curry that we'll put a link to that in the description below, so that if that's something that you all are looking to make. But red lentils are very, very nutritious legume. Lentils period are a very nutritious legume. But 1/4 of a cup of red lentils, which is going to yield, I believe, about 3/4 of a cup, or excuse me, actually it's about 2/3 of a cup cooked. So this is looking at a 1/4 of a cup dry. All right, so 1/4 of a cup dry is going to give you about 2/3 of a cup of cooked red lentils. If you factor in a cup of dry red lentils, that's going to give you about 2.5 cups cooked. All right, so just for a simple conversion there. But 1/4 of a cup dry, 2/3 of a cup cooked is going to give you 3 milligrams of iron, 12 grams of protein. Again, another a very solid source of plant-based protein as well. So a very good source of plant-based iron and plant-based protein. All right, yeah, as I was mentioning, about 2/3 of a cup cooked is 1/4 of a cup dry. All right, let's look at some other sources. Our Ripple plant-based milk. Any Ripple plant-based milk. This is a plant-based milk, a non-dairy milk that is very well, kind of popular out there. It's made with peas or pea protein. And so this is your typical, unsweetened original, which is what we typically get in our house. And so in a 1 cup serving or in an 8-ounce serving, that's going to give you 2.7 milligrams of iron. So again, Ripple plant-based milk, which is a pea milk. I included this in here because it's made from peas, which is a legume. So again, just to give you some insight here. All right, so we cover legumes. The next is soybeans. All right, soybeans and soy products. Now, even though soybeans are considered a legume, I wanted to single it out here because it is a very, very strong source of plant-based iron. So if you think about, your edamame, your tofu, your tempeh, all right, soy milk, these are all viable sources of plant-based iron. Okay, so let's look at tempeh, for example. This is the tempeh from Light Life. Again, we are some tempeh lovers in this house, but a 3-ounce serving of tempeh is going to give you 2 milligrams of iron. All right, not too shabby. Again, we love tempeh. We actually have a recipe for ginger barbecue tempeh that we enjoy making. It is bomb, y'all. I'm just saying. We'll be putting out a recipe video for that soon, so make sure you be on the lookout for that. And 18 grams of protein, which again, excellent source of plant-based protein, plant-based iron. Okay, now this is a product that is a soy-based product. This is a plant-based chicken brand. The brand is called Daring. And so this is a product that Adrian and I enjoy getting from time to time. We've been getting this for about the past, several months, and we enjoy it. Honestly, it's, a nice, it has a very good texture, very, very similar to chicken, I would say. But the reason I included this, again, it's made with soy protein concentrate, as you see there in the ingredients. So looking at what this would give you in a serving, about a 2.5 ounce serving, it's going to give you 3 milligrams of iron, which, again, looking back at, the iron needs for, in my case, being a male between the age of 19 and 50. I'm going to get that. 14.5 milligrams of iron is what you want to try to shoot for on a plant-based diet. So, that's almost a fourth of that amount in one serving of this. All right. Anyone ever tried this plant-based chicken brand? Definitely let us know in the comments below. Let us know what you think of it as well. All right, next item, nuts and seeds. All right, nuts and seeds, cashews, pumpkin seeds, hemp seeds. We keep nuts and seeds as a major staple in our house. And I mean, all kinds of nuts and seeds, especially hemp seeds. These are the hemp seeds that we get. We'll put a link to these down in the description below. Hemp seeds, shelled hemp seeds specifically, great source of plant-based protein. 3 tablespoons in a 3 tablespoon serving, you get 10 grams of plant-based protein and 4 milligrams of iron. Again, that's an excellent amount of iron for just 3 tablespoons, all right, of hemp seeds. I mean, we love putting hemp seeds on our oatmeal in the morning. We love adding them into smoothies. We even like putting them on salads, or even just, earlier today I had a meal with, did some avocado toast, avocado and mushroom toast, had some sauteed kale on the side, drizzle some hemp seeds on there. Boom. It's just an easy way to add a little bit more plant-based protein and iron to your diet. But 4 milligrams from these hemp seeds. Another seed that we keep in our home is pumpkin seeds, aka pepitas. This is the brand that we get. Again, we'll be putting links to all of these in the description below in case you all want to check any of them out. But pumpkin seeds, again, another great source of plant-based protein. 1 ounce, which is going to be about a fourth of a cup, is going to give you 7 grams of protein, about 5 milligrams of plant-based iron. Again, if you think back to those numbers, you all, of the needs of, the amount of iron needed to reach your daily intake, this really helps to get you there. All right, so about 5 milligrams in just 1 serving. We love pumpkin seeds. We love toasting pumpkin seeds. That is a good way to kind of level up the flavor of pumpkin seeds. If you've never tried that before, highly encourage you, toast your pumpkin seeds for just a little. You'll thank yourself. All right, so next we're going to cover off on some iron-fortified foods. These would be cereals, breads, so on and so forth. One that I want to highlight here are these Quaker oatmeal squares. All right, Quaker is good for more than just oatmeal, y'all. Now, these oatmeal squares, now, first and foremost, iron-fortified foods, it's a great way to get plant-based iron into your diet. This cereal specifically, you all, is one that, we've been getting recently, and I want to call it out because it has an astronomically high amount of iron in it. So in just a 1 cup serving, which is typical of what I would eat for breakfast. I mean, I'm a cereal guy. I love usually rotate between oatmeal and cereal for the most part. But in a 1 cup serving, you're gonna get from this, get this y'all, 16.3 milligrams of iron. Let me just put that into perspective. 16 milligrams of iron in just a 1 cup serving of this cereal. That is crazy, y'all. I mean, for most people, right, you can just eat a cup. I could just eat a bowl of that and I'm just about good. All right, that pretty much covers off my 14.5 milligram need. All right, that covers off all of that plus some. All right, so there are some, I shared this to say that there are some really good fortified products out there that do carry high amounts of iron, and this is one of them. So yes, definitely love this cereal. All right, next, dried fruit. All right, raisins, dried apricots, goji berries. All right, dried cranberries, so on and so forth. Now you might be wondering, well, how do dried fruits have good amounts of iron? Well, it's because of the fact that when these fruits are dehydrated, the water content is removed, and so that allows the nutrient components within these fruits to become more saturated. So that is why, from dry fruits, you get, a decent amount of iron compared to if that fruit was in its hydrated state or in its normal state. Next, plant-based protein powders. So I added this on here because there are some good plant-based protein supplements out there, and I know maybe some of you all out there use plant-based protein supplements. If you do, would love to know what you use in the comments below, but there's one on here that I want to highlight specifically, and it is this one by Garden of Life Sport. This is their plant-based protein, their organic plant-based protein. Very good product. We actually just started using this year. And it is a very solid plant-based protein powder. I wouldn't say that it's the best tasting, but in terms of what it offers, everything that it contains in it, which I don't know if you can see that on the screen there, it has so much in it. It has, a complete amino acid profile. Of course, it also contains probiotics, a number of other good things, but in just 1 scoop of this protein powder, it gives you 3.4 milligrams of iron. All right, 3.4 milligrams of iron, 15 grams of plant-based protein. If you do 2 scoops, that goes up to 6.7 milligrams, but hey, another pretty good source of plant-based iron. The reason why is because of what it's made of. So this plant-based protein powder is made up of pea protein, navy bean protein, sprouted lentil bean. So all of the things that we just covered earlier, those legumes, that's basically what this protein is made of. And so that's why it contains the iron amount that it contains. So in terms of plant-based protein powders, it's really going to be product specific or product dependent. So not every plant-based protein powder is going to give you decent amounts of iron, but this one in particular is one that is a good source of plant-based iron. And so from there, the next one is beets. Beets are another good source of just not just iron, but they're good for blood health overall. And one of the things I want to point out is that when it comes to beets, the beetroot itself actually doesn't contain that much iron. Most of the iron is contained in the greens. All right, so the beet leaves, the things that you probably typically just tear off and throw in the trash, try not to do that, because you could be missing out on some great sources of a good source of iron. It's very similar to some of those green leafy vegetables that it's basically the same as those green leafy vegetables that I called out earlier, like the Swiss chard and the spinach. So consider beet greens in that same category. Okay, so beets, again, also beets are very good as a plant-based source of dietary nitrates, which help to expand the our blood vessels to allow more blood to flow through, which is just kind of good for overall blood health. But when it comes to beets, not necessarily a lot of iron in the beet root itself. More of the iron is in the beet leaves or in the beet greens. All right, the next is spirulina. All right, spirulina, and spirulina is it's a product. It is a food that has been generating a lot of buzz as of late, especially over the past few years. And in case you're wondering or not familiar with what spirulina is, spirulina very simply it comes from blue-green algae. It comes from the ocean. It's also found in fresh water, but it's in essence a blue-green algae like the one that you see here. And what happens is that the way it's harvested is that, you know, there are people who harvest it from the oceans, and they dehydrate it or they dry it out and they grind it up and they sell it as, you know, a powder, or maybe they also sell it as, you know, a tablet in tablet form. But it is a very, 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 very nutrient dense food. All right, that's one of the reasons why it's been growing in popularity. And this is something, again, another very key food product that we keep in our household. This is the one specifically that we use. It's pure Hawaiian spirulina. Now, for the record, as some of you all maybe are aware, spirulina is known for having a kind of what's called an oceany taste. Okay, but I will say that if you get a high quality spirulina powder like this one that you see here, it's not going to have as much of that strong fishy oceany taste. Now, I will say we've gotten another spirulina powder before. I won't share which one it is, but it did have, even when I pulled it out of the box, you could just smell it, and it was not pleasant, y'all. But this one, I would say, is very high quality. It has again a slight oceany taste, but over time you get used to that. And as long as you mix it with the right ingredients, we usually put ours in juice. We have a spirulina juice recipe. We'll put a link to that in the description below as well. Some other recipes that we have with spirulina. But in terms of spirulina, now again, it's considered a superfood because it is so nutrient dense. And just to give you an idea, here's the amount of iron that it contains in one serving, 3 milligrams. Now, if you look up here, if you look up towards the top of this nutrition label in terms of serving size, 1 teaspoon of spirulina gives you 3 milligrams of iron and even 2 grams of protein. 1 teaspoon. So if you think about 2 teaspoons, you could consume that over the course of a day. You would get 6 milligrams easily from spirulina. All right. Again, spirulina has a host of other nutrients, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, high in vitamin A, so on and so forth. I'm going to do a separate video, a separate live video on spirulina because it is just that great of a food product. And we definitely believe in it, seeing the effects of it. It's been great for us. When I told you that, you know, we've been doing a lot more with spirulina, these are a couple of items that we've made recently that contain spirulina. The one that you see on the top left are from some spirulina and maca protein bars that we made a little while ago. It contains a lot of different other good ingredients, such as the ones that I've been covering off on here. It has the plant-based protein powder. It has oats. It has 100% cacao, so on and so forth. And so that bar or those bars that we made actually came out after doing the math. Gave us about 5 milligrams of iron per bar. All right, so that is very good when you think about a plant-based homemade protein bar. And this is something that you can easily make. We'll put a link to both of these things that you see here. We do have videos for, so we'll make sure that there are links to these down in the description below. The one that you see on the bottom right, that bottom right picture is our spirulina smoothie bowl. Maybe this is something that some of you all out there have had, but The spirulina smoothie bowl, again, another great way to include spirulina as well as some other high iron plant-based foods into your day. And from everything that we added into these bowls, the amount of iron that came out to was 8 milligrams. All right, so again, very strong. As you can see there, we put a lot of different toppings on it, like pumpkin seeds, goji berries, and some different fruits, hemp seeds on there as well. But these are some great ways to use spirulina and to get all of the many benefits that it provides, like iron. But yes, very much a believer in spirulina. And so just to show a little bit about what some of the research shows, real quick, want to share just what some of the research shows on the impacts of spirulina on individuals, blood and iron levels. So this is a study that's published in 2011, and it was looking at the effects of spirulina on anemia and immune function in senior citizens, so elderly individuals. And so what they did was they had 40 volunteers, men and women with an age of 50 years or older, had no history of major chronic diseases. Participants took spirulina supplement for 12 weeks. All right, and so what they did, or what they found, is that over the 12-week study period, there was a steady increase in average values of mean corpuscular hemoglobin. Again, I mentioned that earlier. We want more hemoglobin in the subjects of both sexes who took this, who took spirulina. In addition, here's the kicker: mean corpuscular volume and mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration also increased in male participants. All right, older women appear to benefit more rapidly from spirulina supplements, so on and so forth. And so this is one study. Another study I want to point out is this one that was done on athletes, specifically endurance athletes, cyclists. Maybe some of you cyclists out there would love to see this. So this study looked at spirulina supplementation in a group of cyclists. And so what they did was they had 15 trained male cyclists ingest 6 grams per day of spirulina or placebo for 21 days. This was a double-blinded, randomized crossover design, so a very robust study methods design with a 14-day washout period between trials. So basically what they had these men do was, for 21 days, they took spirulina, and then they had a 14-day period where they took nothing, and then for another 21 days they took the placebo, and it was randomized as to who took what first. And so they had participants complete a 1-hour submax endurance test, all right, followed by lactate threshold and repeated sprint performance, so on and so forth. And so what I want to go to here is the result. Following spirulina supplementation, lactate and heart rate were significantly lower. All right, here's the thing: hemoglobin was significantly higher than placebo. Peak and average power were significantly higher during repeated sprint performance trials. All right, and so spirulina supplementation reduced homeostatic disturbances, so on and so forth. So again, we're seeing the impacts here of spirulina supplementation on hemoglobin levels in athletes, and endurance athletes specifically. So if you're an endurance athlete out there, or if you're an athlete out there, let us know in the comments, have you tried spirulina? Have you considered trying spirulina? And one more study I want to show here very briefly is this study used chlorella, which is it's similar to spirulina. It also comes from blue-green algae, slightly different in its nutrient profile, but very, very similar. And so this was a study looking at chlorella supplementation in pregnant women. And so what they did was they tested in Japanese pregnant women. They took 70 pregnant women, were placed into a control group or the chlorella group. So they had about half in the control group, the other half took chlorella supplements. All right, and so what they did was during the 12th to the 18th week of their pregnancy, of gestation until delivery, they took 6 grams of chlorella. Again, that's about 2 teaspoons. And so what they found was that subjects in the chlorella group were significantly lower compared with the control group at the second and third trimesters. All right, or sorry, this was the proportion of anemic subjects. All right, so in the chlorella group, the incidences of proteinuria and edema significantly lower. These results suggest that chlorella supplementation significantly reduces the risk of pregnancy-associated anemia, proteinuria, and edema. Chlorella supplement may be useful as a resource for natural folate, B12, and iron for pregnant women. So again, just a few studies, but seeing the potential impacts of spirulina and chlorella in individuals in terms of helping to combat anemia, which is, these are really, really good findings. And so the 10th one here is something that you chocolate lovers, I'm sure y'all love to hear this. And that is, yes, dark chocolate is a good source of plant-based iron. The darker, the better. So specifically, cacao, the more cacao contained in the chocolate, the better. So, if you're someone who typically likes milk chocolate, you want to try to get more on the darker chocolate cacao side. Again, the closer you can to get to 100% cacao, the better. But I'm sure this is good news for some of you all out there, chocolate lovers. But this is one product that, again, Adrian and I use. We put this in our oatmeals. We put it in a number of different things like, those plant-based protein bars I showed earlier. But this is just some baker's chocolate. It's 100% cacao, so there's no milk in this. It is just straight cacao, all right? So it is very bitter, but, again, you place it with sweeter ingredients, you'll be okay, all right? But looking at the amount of iron in just 2 pieces, so that's just 2 bars. If you look at on the picture there, those 2 bars that you see at the bottom there, those 2 little small pieces of this 100% cacao is going to give you 2.8 milligrams of iron. All right, almost 3 milligrams of iron from just 2 pieces of chocolate. Now, some of you all out there watching this, you chocolate lovers, hey, again, this is probably good news for you because a great thing you can do is you could probably eat a piece of this chocolate as a snack once, as part of your mid-morning snack, once as part of your afternoon snack. Cacao is also a great source of other nutrients like polyphenols, so on and so forth. But this is again a good source of plant-based iron. For those of you all out there, maybe if you're looking for a powdered version, this is 100% cacao powder. Again, we'll put links to all of these items in the description below. But for a tablespoon of cacao powder, you get 1 milligram of iron. Again, still not too shabby there. A couple bonus items to help with improving your iron and overall blood health. And the first one is, not a food. It's actually not something that will raise your iron levels per se, but it's exercise. Now, exercise is actually something that causes us to use up iron. So again, it's not, I don't put it on here because it's something that will, it doesn't have an acute effect on your body's iron levels in terms of raising iron levels. Because what happens when we exercise or when we do a training session is that our bodies release a hormone called hepcidin. And what hepcidin does is it deals with how our body's regulation of iron. And so when we exercise or when we do a workout session, our body's levels of hepcidin are raised. And as a result, our body's levels of iron have declined. We've used iron. And so, it doesn't cause us to, it doesn't raise your iron levels in that moment. Now, the reason I put it on here is because of exercise's long-term effect on overall blood health. Specifically, what it does is as we exercise, our bodies begin to increase in the amount of blood volume, all right? And it also helps to bump or to spark red blood cell formation or the formation of new red blood cells, That's that process erythropoiesis that we looked at earlier. And so as we exercise, and again, this is from constant exercise or consistent exercise routine, our bodies will begin to produce more red blood cells. And then it'll also, get this, it also produces, our bodies will begin to produce more capillaries. All right, so more blood vessels, more capillaries will begin to form. That's a process called angiogenesis. The reason why that happens is because as we exercise, that's our body's way of adapting to the training that we're doing, because our body is basically saying, hey, we want to get you ready for these other training sessions and physical feats that are ahead. So we are going to give you some help by giving you some more red blood cells to carry more oxygen to the muscles so that you'll be more equipped in the long run. So that's one of the ways that our body responds, which is, thank the Lord for that, because that is just amazing. All right. And then the second bonus that I want to share here, and it's actually something, again, it's not a food item, but this is something that some of you all probably have in your homes right now, and you probably use it maybe every day and don't even realize that it could be a way for you to consume or get more iron in your diet. Can anyone guess what it is? Give you a second, put it in the comments. Cast iron skillet. So if you guess cast iron skillet, kudos to you right now for guessing that. Apologies, I don't have a prize for you, but way to go there. But yes, cast iron skillets, y'all. And this was something that I thought it was a hoax. I thought it was just a myth that, using a cast iron skillet or cast iron cookware could help or add iron to food. I remember, I think my mom saying this, some years ago that, yeah, like, cooking in a cast iron skillet can, causes the amount of iron in your food to increase, or it kind of, infuses iron into your food. And I thought, whatever, that's ridiculous. But turns out there is actual scientific evidence to back this up, believe it or not. So just to show a couple of studies here, this is one study, again, this is recent research, 2021. This is a 2021 literature review, a systematic review. And so they looked at 13 studies that they included. And what they did was they wanted to look at how, cooking food in iron pots and iron ingots, which is a type of iron pot, how it can increase the blood hemoglobin level and iron content in the food. And what they found was, out of those 13 studies, that four studies reported significant increases in blood hemoglobin levels, while others reported only a minor increase, which I would say that something is better than nothing. All right. Another study that was published in 2019, this is another review study, and it looked at iron-containing cookware for the reduction of iron deficiency anemia, specifically among children and females of reproductive age in low and middle income countries. This was a systematic review, so they looked at a lot of studies covering this topic. And so at the end, they included 11 studies in their review. And so what they found was that statistically significant increases in hemoglobin and or iron were observed in half of the studies, or 50% of the studies, on pots, and 1/3 of the studies on ingots. Positive outcomes were observed among children in 50% of the studies, and among women of female reproductive age women, 2 out of the 7 studies. So it says iron-containing cookware could serve as a means for reducing iron deficiency anemia, especially among children. The potential advantages of iron-containing cookware include relative cost, effectiveness, and complementary combination with other interventions. However, further research is needed. So, y'all, cast iron skillets, this probably could be one of the easiest ways to add iron to your diet, and you probably weren't even aware that it was a thing. But again, we just saw that there is science to back this up, even though it's an area that is, constantly being researched and needs more research. There is evidence to back this up. And so we'll even put a link to cast iron skillet. If you don't have one, Adrian and I use cast iron skillets all the time. That's pretty much our go-to type of cookware. So we have two that we use on our stovetop that we kind of rotate through, but a very simple way that you might not have been aware of that can help you increase the amount of iron in your diet, especially if you eat primarily a plant-based diet. And so as we kind of look at what does all of this look like in a practical sense. So I mentioned earlier that we're going to look at a specific kind of meal plan, and what does that actually look like? How do you put all of this together? All of the foods that, we just shared, what does it actually look like to put together a meal and a snack plan for a day? So what I decided to do was to put together an example of a meal plan for a day as in terms of what 28 milligrams, I said 27 earlier, it's actually 28. So this is going to allow you to see what 28 milligrams of iron in a day looks like, which is a sufficient amount of iron for probably for most individuals. And so in terms of what this could look like in a day, if you started off your breakfast, let's say you had for breakfast one of those spirulina smoothie bowls like we covered off on earlier. Again, I mentioned that spirulina smoothie bowl has 8 milligrams of iron. So let's say that was your breakfast. And then let's say for lunch, you did a tempeh and black bean bowl with kale, sauteed kale, and 1.5 tablespoons of hemp seeds. That would yield about 7 milligrams of plant-based iron. And then let's say you wanted to fit in a snack, maybe in the afternoon. So let's say you made your own trail mix, which is super easy to make, by the way. But in that trail mix, you included 2 tablespoons each of cashews, pumpkin seeds, goji berries, and cacao, 100% cacao. That would give you about 6 milligrams of iron. And then to end it with dinner, let's say you did the red lentil curry with some naan bread. I mentioned earlier that we do have a recipe for red lentil curry. That would give you about 7 milligrams of iron based on the amount of red lentil curry that you would consume. Looking at consuming a little over a cup or so of red lentil curry, that would give you about 7 milligrams of plant-based iron. And so, as you can see, if you tally all of that up, that totals about 28 milligrams of plant-based iron. This is just an example, again, for one day, but this shows you how easy it can be for you to get the necessary amounts of iron in a plant-based diet, as long as you plan things out properly, right? You have the right strategy, you have the right foods accessible, and you maintain the discipline in putting those foods together to get the amounts that you need. But this is just to show you that it is possible. It is possible to get that amount of iron within a single day, and perhaps more. That's just, hey, that's just a breakfast, lunch, and dinner with one snack. Maybe some of y'all do 2 snacks in a day. I mean, or maybe you do a juice, for example, that has spirulina or something like that. This is just one example to show that you can get that amount of iron within a day. Now, if you want to just knock it all out in one meal, you could also go the easy route and just, hey, eat a bowl of those Quaker oatmeal squares with 8 ounces of some of this ripple milk, this pea milk, which will give you about 19 milligrams of iron. I mean, I'm just saying, hey, if you want to find a very simple, quick strategy, again, like I mentioned, this is something that, I sometimes will do. You can eat a bowl of this along with some strawberries to give you some vitamin C to help your body take in that iron, and you can pretty much call it a day. But yes, just hope, this is an example, another example to show different ways that can help give you that amount of iron. Now I do understand that, you know, there are times where, hey, maybe this might not be as feasible or super feasible to get this amount of iron, in which case you might need to consume a, you know, an iron supplement. That's totally okay. Again, I'm doing a personal challenge where I'm going to try to avoid taking any plant-based iron supplements, but, you know, maybe you find yourself, maybe you need a plant-based iron supplement. And, you know, if that's the case, we would love to know, like, for those of you all out there, do you use iron supplements to get the iron that you need, or do you rely solely on whole foods for your iron? My wife, Adrienne, I think I mentioned before, she deals with some anemia, some low iron, and she takes an iron supplement. It's a very good one. I'll share it a little bit later, but, you know, never feel like you have to try to just do this based on consuming whole foods. Again, I'm just showing you what this could look like, but if you get to the point where you're like, man, this is kind of difficult, I kind of need a little bit of help, take an iron supplement. There's no shame in that whatsoever. But if you're looking to try to create some strategies using more whole food sources, then, you know, these are some great ways that you can do it. And so, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't share some ways to help improve the absorption of plant-based iron, because as we mentioned before, now when you consume plant-based iron, your body doesn't absorb plant-based iron or that non-heme iron as well as it does iron from animal sources. And so basically what we have to do is we have to help our bodies out a little bit more to take in and absorb that iron. So right now I'm going to share 7 tips that can help you to improve the absorption of your iron from plant-based sources. And the first is to try to co-consume or to consume whatever iron food you're consuming with vitamin C. All right, so this could be citrus fruits, strawberries, peppers, so on and so forth. Vitamin C helps the body's absorption capacity, or the body's ability to absorb iron, especially plant-based iron. So, you know, if you have, you know, access to any of these foods, one way that you could do it, you know, one of the things that I like to do is with those spirulina bars that I shared earlier, is that, you know, hey, I might eat a couple of mandarin oranges and then I'll eat that bar, or eat some trail mix with 2 mandarin oranges so that I get the vitamin C as well as the iron. Another example, like I shared with the cereal, all right? If you have that cereal, that Quaker oatmeal square cereal, you can eat that with some cut up strawberries or some other citrus fruits. Or you can consume, you know, black beans or, you know, your tempeh along with some peppers. Anything that contains vitamin C, that's going to really help you out. Another thing is avoiding consuming iron with calcium, polyphenols, and oxalates. Oxalates are compounds that are contained often in green leafy vegetables. Now, you might be wondering, well, how exactly am I supposed to do that if, you know, I mean, some of the foods that you have are going to have oxalates in them. They're going to probably have polyphenols in them. Not sharing this so that to try to get you to overanalyze what you're eating. These are just some things to just be aware of so that you can understand, you know, what could be an inhibiting factor of absorbing iron. But calcium does inhibit the body's ability to absorb iron. Again, not saying that you can't consume calcium, because some of these products contain, you know, some of the things that you eat and drink will contain iron plus some of these items. But calcium is one. Polyphenols, specifically those found in coffee and tea, can inhibit the absorption of iron. So if you are a tea drinker or coffee drinker, it's recommended that maybe you wait an hour before or an hour or so after you've consumed iron in order to drink coffee or tea, so that that's not counteracting the iron in any way. And then oxalates in green leafy vegetables, Now, here's one tip here. One of the ways to help knock out or to kind of decrease the amount of oxalates in green leafy veggies is by cooking vegetables, is by cooking your green leafy veggies. So you can do that, you know, sauteing veggies is a very easy way. You can kind of cut out the amount of oxalates. So, hey, you could even cook it in a cast iron skillet. That way you really get the most bang for your buck there. But try to avoid co-consuming with those. Also avoid consuming iron immediately post-exercise. Again, I mentioned before that when we exercise, our bodies release a hormone called hepcidin. And so when hepcidin levels are up, our body's abilities to absorb iron are lower. All right. So, you know, even if you're someone who takes an iron supplement, if you take an iron supplement, try to avoid taking it right after you work out. All right. It's not really helping. Okay. So try to avoid consuming immediately post-exercise. Try to wait at least an hour or so for those hepcidin levels to decrease. All right. Another tip is to consume folate. Folate, also known as vitamin B9. Now, folate isn't a substance that it's not an iron. It's not an iron-containing substance, but it is a very important nutrient that's responsible for reproducing new cells. All right. It plays a big role in producing new DNA within our bodies, within each cell. So, you know, when you think about this in the sense of kind of building your blood levels back up, so if you consume more folate, then that's going to help your body's ability to produce more red blood cells, which is going to play a role in your body's ability to overcome anemia and to get more iron, so important, to increase hemoglobin levels, so on and so forth. So folate is a very important nutrient, especially for pregnant women. So, you know, definitely just something to keep in mind there. Another thing is to be aware of medications that could counteract iron absorption. So any non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, so on and so forth. You definitely want to check if those of you all out there who are taking any types of over-the-counter or prescription medications, make sure you watch out and maybe do a little research on what could be counteracting your absorption of iron. Next tip, combine different sources of plant-based iron. We covered off on a very long list in this video, many different sources. And even in that meal plan that I showed earlier, that was, you know, each meal you pretty much saw iron sources from, you know, multiple iron sources within each meal and each snack. So definitely just a good tip to try to combine different sources of iron as much as you can in your meals and snacks. And then last but certainly not least is to strive for more than the recommended amount. All right. Strive to consume more iron than the typical recommended amount, because as I mentioned before, per the NIH, the recommended dietary allowance for vegetarians is almost twice as high than for people who eat meat. So you want to keep those numbers in mind that we covered off on earlier. You can backtrack to earlier in the video if you want to see what those exact numbers are, what numbers that you would need specifically for your population or your age group. Now, again, as I mentioned before, if you find yourself needing or wanting to try out an iron supplement, then, you know, wanted to share an example of one that you could try out. This is the one actually that my wife Adrienne uses, and she's been using it for a number of years. This is called Blood Builder by Mega Food. You know, it's an all plant-based iron supplement. We'll include a link to this in the description below. But one tablet is going to give you 26 milligrams of iron. It also has some B12, also folate and some vitamin C. Also going to give you a little bit of beetroot in there, which, you know, good source of dietary nitrate. So it's a really good iron source. And you know, I would say every time Adrienne takes it, I mean, she notices a difference. And I mean, she verbalizes it. Like, you know, there are some days where, you know, she might be feeling a little tired You know, and I'll ask her, like, did you take your iron today? And she'd be like, no. And, you know, but it's one of those things where, you know, every time she does take it, she has a noticeable difference. And so, you know, again, for those of you all out there who might be looking for a viable iron supplement, this is a, you know, a good one to try that contains not just iron itself, but some other very good nutrients like some of the ones that we covered off on in this video. And if you're wanting to see some recipes for some of the items that we covered off in this video, such as the spirulina smoothie bowl or the spirulina protein bars that I talked about as well, then click on one of these videos that you see over here in the right to check out one of those. If you want to see or check out one of our other videos or one of our other recipes, then click the one right below it. And thanks so much for watching, and we will see you in the next video.